Hello and welcome to Tony's Bonsai. At this time of year, one of the things that I do is check in on my trees and make sure that the wire that I applied in the autumn or the winter isn't beginning to scar the branches and trunks of the trees, particularly with my deciduous material. My evergreen trees like pines, junipers and spruce, I'm happy to leave the wire on those trees. They tend to be a bit more springy and it takes longer for them to hold the position. Also, wire marking on those types of trees isn't as big a deal. But stuff like hawthorn and particularly Japanese maple, it's really quite important that I don't get deep scarring. So I'm going to remove some wire today and take a look and see how these trees are getting on. Okay, let's start off with these two Japanese maples. I picked these up last autumn in the garden centre. They were basically dying. I think I got them for £1 each, or 50p or something like that. Brought them back to health, applied some wire on them a few months ago. This one's doing great. This one did come into leaf, but the leaves have since dropped off. I'll remove the wire and hopefully it comes back to life, but whatever happens, I need to get the wire off of this one anyway. When it comes to wire removal, it's one of those funny things that some people say, I like to unwind wire, and other people say I like to cut it off. And for me, I just deal with it on a tree by tree basis. I don't have to have one position that I stick to and that's my position. You know, it's like, you don't need to make that decision. You can work on each tree and decide with each one whether you want to cut the wire off or remove it. While I'm just removing this wire, there is a lot of nonsense talked in bonsai. And I did a video, I think last year, about bonsai tools, suggesting my favourite ones. And there was a comment on there, it might have been on Facebook, I can't remember. And it was basically somebody saying that wire cutters are the most important tool. Proper bonsai wire cutters are the most important tool in bonsai. And I just think, you've got to be completely mad for that to be your opinion. You can cut wire with anything. Look, you know, basically any kind of decent wire cutter will do it. And if you're thinking about, you know, if money's short and you're having to decide what tools to buy, a good pair of branch cutters, a nice pair of bonsai scissors, to me they're more important than getting some specific bonsai wire cutters. This healthy acer, I seem to remember, is a going green, which is one of my favourite types of Japanese maple. You get them in the UK really cheap in the spring, so they're very easy to come by, and they're gorgeous. They're an amazing green colour in the spring, and then through the autumn they go just an absolutely fantastic red, probably a better colour than any of my other Japanese maples. So if you've not got a going green, highly recommended by me. A bit like the wiring, I'm not going to show me removing all the vet tape off all of these trees because that'd just get boring. But one of the interesting things I do want to know is how well the vet tape protects the bark of trees from scarring. That is one of the potential uses of it. I'm well aware of the uses of it in terms of protecting branches from snapping, and something like this, a Japanese maple, is very, very brittle. But I still managed to get some really nice movement into this tree, which is impressive, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the vet tape. So it'll be interesting just to see now whether it holds in position and whether it's marked the bark. And you can certainly use clip and grow techniques with Japanese maples, but I like a bit of movement early down low in the trunk, and to be able to get that, just that kind of shape, it really goes a long way to developing an interesting bonsai in the future, I think. From this angle here, you can see there is some very minor marking. It's almost like a kind of bruising on the trunk, but it's very smooth to the touch. There's a bit more there, but that's almost negligible. So all in all, I'd say that vet tape has done a brilliant job. I also took the vet tape off this first tree, and It would be a shame if this doesn't make it, because that's actually got some better movement. However, it just goes outside now, and hopefully it's got enough energy to push again, but I'm not confident. Next up, we've got another of my favourite aces, which is the Katsura. Beautiful leaf this, and I really like it at this time of year with the green and the red. And again, I wired this in the early spring, got some shape into it, and it's looking good, and time to get the wire off. If you're new to my channel, thank you for watching, and I will put a link at the end of the video to the video where I wired this tree, and there's also a link in the description, just so you can see how I went about it. But I'm really, really happy with that as the beginnings of a tree. You know, lovely movement. It's got nice branches coming from good places. That's important. You know, this branch comes from the outside of this bend. This branch here comes from where I did a chop, but it's effectively on the outside of another bend. And there's going to be a good bonsai in this tree in the future, I think. This hawthorn's one that I've been waiting to work on ever since I first, well, collected it over 2 years ago. But when I worked on it late summer, I did some really quite extreme bending on one of the branches. I really applied some heavy movement to it, and it's just been sitting growing since then. It's really healthy. You can see all this green foliage and all the big shoots it's put out. So my hope now is when I remove these wires, this thick branch is going to be set in place. Let's have a look and see if it has. The bark at the base of this tree is beginning to develop some nice cragginess and character. It's also got some really good movement to it. However, this one branch here was very, very straight. So this is the one that I bent, and I'm going to take that wire off. This is some wiring that I wouldn't even dream of trying to uncoil. It's too valuable a tree to me, and as I say, with the work that I've done, I wouldn't want to risk damaging any of it. So I'll just chop this off. I've just taken the wire and the vet tape off, and again, it's a really good result on the vet tape. There's hardly any marking, maybe just some very mild bruising, but you can barely see anything. And this is, you know, I could have possibly left it another couple of months, seeing how little it's marked, if I'm honest. However, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to damage the bark, so I've done it maybe a little early, but I'm always learning. Next time I'll know to leave that maybe another month, just to allow it to hold this shape. But it still has taken that curve to a certain extent, and it looks a lot better than it did before I did anything, which was a very straight branch. One of the things I do love about creating these videos is all the feedback I get. There's some very knowledgeable, experienced bonsai practitioners who follow my channel, and there was quite a few similar comments on this. And what the majority of people were saying was they liked the work that I did, bending that branch round to add interest. However, they thought that, you can't really see it because of all the leaves, but there's a thick branch at the top coming up here and then spreading. And what everyone seemed to say was that branch needs to be removed in a fairly big chop. Looking at the tree, studying it, I have to agree. It's quite clunky how it grows out at the top, and I think it's going to be better removed, and it'll be a more interesting, characterful tree. However, I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to save that till late summer, early autumn to make that chop. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But there is a stub that I left on last year on this branch that I bent, and that can now be removed. While I've just spun the tree around, it's like there's a voice in my head saying, do the big chop, do the big chop. And I'm kind of toying with the idea. We're going in for the big cut now. I'm not sure. I'll do this one first anyway, which is to remove that stub there, because I do like the way, it's hard to see with those branches in the way. Let me just move the camera. I do like this change of direction here, this kind of elbow. That works quite well. And it's kind of in keeping with the other movements within the tree further down the trunk. So yeah, it's nice. Time and tide waits for no man. So I'm looking at this branch and I'm thinking, what is a good reason for delaying pruning this off and waiting until perhaps early August to do it? And I just can't think of a good reason. I've made my decision. I've known this ever since I did that first video, that this is going to be pruned off and this branch here is going to be the new leader of the tree. So let's do it now. I've had a good look at the tree and worked out exactly where I want to cut and the angle. And I think basically I just cut above this branch in the same plane that this branch moves, so that hopefully the elbow underneath over time will just sort of heel over and this will look quite natural. So let's do it. There may be some of you watching who think you could have done an air layer there, and I could have done an air layer. It was quite an interesting section of tree. But I was watching a really interesting video the other day by Xavier, Bonsai Retreat, and he did a video about air layers, and it was a bit of a discussion about why we choose to do them, when and why we choose to do them, and sometimes it's not always worth it. I don't want to delay the healing of this tree. This has got the potential to be a fantastic tree. I don't want to hold it back. I don't want to potentially risk, getting anything bad happening to it by weakening it and that kind of thing, which is always a possibility. And yeah, it was a really interesting video just to get me thinking, about why we do things in bonsai. And I'm all about that. Not just doing things blindly, but thinking about it and having a good reason for our logic. And everything in bonsai should be like that. When we make decisions, we should know why we're doing it. And there's a good reason I didn't do that, is because really I'm not interested in that branch in the air layer. I want to move the tree forward, and I'm impatient. What I'm trying to say is I'm impatient. I didn't plan on making that chop today, but I'm super happy I did. At last now I'm beginning to see the future of the tree and I'm loving it. Even though I said earlier about leaving my conifers a bit later in the year, I've got a small eastern hemlock here I bought from a garden centre last year. Didn't cost me much. I put some wire on it and I think I got some really good movement into it. And I don't want it to scar and mark up. I've had a look at it and I've got a feeling it's beginning to bite in, so I'm going to take the wire off and see how it's doing. I didn't use any vet tape on this tree, and you can see it has already, I thought it was beginning to bite in. It's hard to tell, but you can see it's already biting in there, creating marks. Nothing too bad, as I say, especially not on this kind of tree, but I'm glad I've got that off. And it's held the shape nicely. You can see here that movement that's in it, which is the main thing. And I can now, possibly in a few weeks, I can look at coming in and doing some pruning on this and starting it on its journey around this basic primary structure. That hemlock was going to be my last tree, but as I just took it back outside into the garden, I noticed this cotoneaster that I worked on last summer. Need to get the wire off it. It's looking good. If you're the proud owner of one of those mint condition memories, you might remember that there were two cotoneasters that I worked on. Unfortunately, the other one didn't make it. The leaves went brown, it didn't come through in the spring, and it's a goner. I've just been outside to look for it, but I can't find it. I must have thrown it away already. But this one is looking good, and I'll get the wire off and we can take a look at the shape. The wire's off, and I'm really happy with how this tree's developing. It had the initial prune and some root work done in 2021, wired it last year, and now I think it's beginning to take on quite a nice tree-like form, which ultimately is the aim of bonsai. So yeah, if this can have another good couple of years growth, I think some of these branches need pruning back, but I wouldn't do that now. This can just rest and grow for a couple of months, and I'll probably come back to this in early autumn and start maybe doing some branch selection. This has been a really enjoyable video for me to put together today. I love taking off wire and seeing the tree in its new form with the new movement and twists that I've added. And from this point, I can start to see how the tree can move forward using either possibly a bit more wiring, or for something like this, I'll probably now switch to clip and grow to develop the tree-like form. So it's exciting stuff. As always, thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.